Welcome to the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge Masterclass, lesson number 4, beginning your portrait with glazes. Hi, I'm mattphilleo. I'm the instructor here at Realistic Acrylic Portrait School, and I am inviting you to join our first ever Winter Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge. It is freezing cold outside. It was negative 15 degrees when I woke up, but a nice, beautiful sunny day. It's warm inside the studio, so I'm excited to show you the next step in painting a portrait you can be proud of using the acrylic glazing technique. Now, where we left off in our last lesson was we finished the sketch and we then sealed in that sketch with a layer of matte medium and titanium white mixed with a little bit of ultramarine and phthalo blue. And we have everything muted and ready to go with our first acrylic glazing layer. Now, if you haven't taken the challenge, I'd encourage you to do so because I'm going to teach the entire process of how to paint a portrait, starting with the sketch all the way to the finished painting. You can sign up below at realisticacrylic.com, acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. Again, realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. When you sign up, you'll be able to get a welcome kit. It's a PDF downloadable guide. You can download that to your device of choice or print it out. It's got several pages, not too many, just a few, but it's got your supplies list, your palette layout guide, and your reference photo with and without the grid. So go ahead and sign up. It's completely free. And I'm excited to show you how you can paint a portrait you can be proud of. You might have never tried painting a portrait before, but you've always desired to do it. If you have the desire to do it, I believe God will help you to be able to do that. And I am honored to be your teacher and your guide to help make that process possible for you. All right, well, we're going to begin here in just a moment. But before we do so, I'd just like to open up the word of prayer, ask a blessing on this class, and then we'll dive right into the painting process. So, Father, I thank you for this opportunity to meet here with the students, to be able to show them this step here in beginning the painting. Help me to be able to teach with this clarity. Help them to be able to learn the steps and to confidently incorporate them into their work. I'm praying for peace, and I'm praying that they would be able to mix the colors well, apply them to the canvas well with their brushes. And I just ask that you would guide every step in this class. We give you thanks, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, let's go over the colors that we're using here in this challenge. I have them all laid out. So just so you have that again, it is in your palette layout guide and the welcome kit. We have raw umber dark, burnt sienna, raw sienna, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, naphtha red, organic orange, Indian yellow, and titanium white. If you don't have some of these colors, there are substitutions. You can use, instead of naphtha red, you can use a cad red, deep, I think, and then for organic orange, you could use like a cad red light or a cad orange, but this is kind of a reddish orange color here. So for raw umber dark, some people don't have that color. You could use raw umber mixed with a couple other colors. I do have a video that shows you how to make your own raw umber dark, or you could use a burnt umber. It'd be pretty close, but it's not quite the same tint. But I'll put a link in the description of the video so you can make your own raw umber dark if you don't have that color available. I think it might only be available through Nova Color. So we're going to get our palette set up here. Go ahead and excuse me, lay out your palette. You're going to get 3 brushes, 1 inch flat, 3/8 flat, and a round. This would be, I think, like maybe a size 12 or something like that, but just a kind of a thick round. Doesn't have to be the same exact size, but just something similar. So these are the brushes you're going to be using. You might also want to have a towel handy so you can wipe off any mistakes you might make. And I just like to set that in my pocket so I can grab that quickly. Spray bottle to keep your keep your paints moist on your palette. And you might want to have a paper towel or something like that as well. Make sure you have some matte medium squirted right in the middle of your palette. You don't want to use gloss medium, gel medium, or retardant medium, but make sure it's matte medium. That's going to work the best for you. A Liquitex, Nova Color are great brands. And again, I have all these supplies listed in the welcome kit. So again, feel free to sign up for the challenge and get your welcome kit, and you'll have all the supplies written down. Okay, so to begin, oh, and one last thing before we get into the process. If you haven't posted your sketch, please, I encourage you, post your sketch in our Facebook group. I got to slow down a little bit. Post your sketch in our Facebook group, Realistic Acrylic Portraits, because that is going to encourage other artists to then post their sketch, and they can see, you know, what you've done, and they can encourage you. You in turn can encourage them. You can share tips on how to make your portraits better. I'm in the group as well, so if you have questions, you can ask me personally, and I can help you with your portrait. But definitely post your sketch in our Realistic Acrylic Portraits Facebook group. All right, now finally, let's begin. Step number one is basically to block in the contrast between the cool and warm areas of the painting and your lights and darks. So you're trying to develop a contrast between the cool and warm tints and the lights and darks on a large scale. That's step number one. And in order to do that, you really want to take a look at your reference photo just for a moment, kind of size it up. That's what I did actually before I started this lesson, is just kind of develop my plan of attack, so to speak. And you want to make sure that you're noticing the differences between the warmer tones and the cool tones. So for example, we have the warmer tones and the grassy kind of reeds in the back, and then the man's clothing and his hat and his face, and some of the saddle gear on the horse. The cool tones would be, you know, the sky, the hills, and then the snow, and then large portions of the horse. And so what we want to do is develop that contrast, and then also, you know, that's a color contrast there. But then a value contrast would be, you know, your lights and darks, right? And you have white on one side, black on the other side, if you've ever seen a scale of light and dark, and then all the shades of gray in between. So you want to consider how light or how dark a certain area of your reference photo is. And as we study our reference photo, we notice, you know, his clothing, right, is very, very dark. And, you know, areas in here also are dark because they're in shadow. They're just as dark as his clothing. Areas of his boot are just as dark as his clothing because it's in shadow. The hat underneath, you know, the brim of the hat, it's very dark, same dark value as a shirt. So we're going to treat that similarly. But again, we're going to be starting on a larger scale first. So let's go ahead and take our 1-inch flat, and we're going to begin by putting down the color that's going to give us the most contrast first. And it's going to be a warm color, but it's also darker, right? Because we're looking at reference photo, clothing, reeds are darker than, you know, the sky, hill, horse, and snow, at least in general, right? So that's what we're going to hit first. We're going to take a little, just a bit, take your flat brush, kind of hold it like this, and take just a little bit of it. You're going to dip just the corner, right? Just the corner into, maybe get a little more, just the corner of the brush like this, and then you're going to set it to the side of your matte medium right here, your dollop of matte medium. Don't skimp on your matte medium, use a large amount. It's going to make it a lot easier to paint. So buy it by the gallon at Nova Color if you can. It's a great way to go. If you use just a couple drips, you're not going to be able to get this technique really incorporated. So you take that little bit and you smear it in, kind of blend it into just a portion. Don't mix it into the whole thing, just a portion, so you can control the ratio of your matte medium to your paint. And matte medium, again, if you're not familiar, is acrylic polymer resin without the pigment. So it's acrylic polymer, no pigment. It's milky white when wet, dries crystal clear, and that's what we use to create these translucent effects. And translucent is basically meaning light can pass through, not completely through, but partially through. Transparent is where it's passes completely through. Translucent is where light partially passes through your layers of paint, and it reflects off of the layers, you know, the gesso underneath and then back to your eye, and gives it a great vibrancy and depth. But I'm kind of going off on bunny trails here, so just want to make sure you get these concepts down. All right, back to our mixing. So we mix this together. We're gonna go for a ratio of about like 95% matte medium to 5% paint, something like that. Maybe a little like 90% matte medium, 10% paint, something like that. 90-10 is our ratio. And you can set this up and kind of check your colors with a white card. So I'm just going to use a piece of paper here, and we're going to just test that glaze out right there. All right, so you can see approximately what that should look like before you apply it. Go lighter than what you think. Lighter than what you think. It's definitely the way to go. All right, so we'll start on the left-hand side. And we're just going to block this into the area of the reeds. Now the color is not exactly the same. We know that the color is actually has some golden tints as well, but this is just going to make it easy for us. And it'll give us a quick distinction between these areas. Now on the bottom, you can just kind of you can turn your brush to the side so you can get kind of the effect of some of the snow and the distance there, and then flip it to more of the flat side. So more thin right here to get some of those grassy reeds, and then use more of the flat side up here. Keep a wet edge, cut around the hind quarters of the horse, right? Use firm pressure as you're cutting in. And then we will bring this up, and always keep a wet edge. Okay, now use the thin side of the brush as you're going up into those upper areas. So up here, we just kind of turn the brush on the side a little bit, get some of these grassy reeds. Okay, don't overbrush it. That's another way to ensure that you have a nice smooth coverage. Now bring it into the clothing. Okay, and we're using the same color. And go into the saddle. You cut around. He has gloves on, so we're going to bring this into a large portion of the hands. We're going to paint this over his clothing here. And we're going to paint over this area here where his body meets the horse. And don't try to paint around ropes and things like that. It would just be insane trying to do that. You would get really frustrated, and I think I would too, so don't even try to do that. We're gonna paint those parts in opaquely. Now we paint, you know, the clothing part right here. Again, just trying to set up some major distinctions in tonal value. And then also the boot as well. You want to do that. Okay, so you have that. We have the belt. You can turn your brush on the side to get the thin part of it, to get some of these straps. And if you go outside the lines, it's not a big deal, because everything is we're gonna have so many layers on there. We're gonna tighten up things where we go outside the lines. I'd rather you go outside the lines than to not color everything in for fear of going outside the lines. So don't be worried about going outside the lines. Now, did we get this area up here on the top? His hat? Nope, not yet. Let's do the hat. Okay, we're going to turn our brush a little bit at a side angle, paint right over his face, but only the shadow. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. See if I can get that in the camera. So you want to paint in the shadow, but if you can avoid the light, the highlighted part of the face, please do that. Please avoid that part. And then just paint the hat Shadowed part of the hat, top part. You can hit the beard a little bit, but we're going to avoid the highlighted part. We'll just fill in this part below his chin too. Yeah, it should be done. I should have left that shirt unpainted, but oh well. I'll just have to use titanium white later to add that in. So we'll just kind of keep it simple, and we'll just have his whole body kind of colored in here. All right, and now need to get a little more paint on my palette. Or sorry, a little more paint on my brush here. Ran out of glaze. And I think I got a little blotch of paint on the bottom here. I must have hit my brush as I was focusing on something else. Oh well. We make mistakes sometimes. That's okay. We'll just fill that in with white later. All right, I'm going to add a little more ombre dark and recreate that glaze. And I want to hit this right-hand side and cut around the horse. Okay, and we're doing the reeds, just treating this whole section as a color field. We're not trying to paint really texture so much. Now we are painting the outside areas but don't try to paint little reeds or anything in there at this point. Just try to fill this whole area in with color as smoothly as you can. But if you're going to finish up any strokes, try to finish up your strokes with vertical strokes. You can paint kind of horizontally, then you can paint diagonally to smooth it out more, but finish up more with vertical strokes because that will correlate better with the texture of these reeds and weeds that go upward generally. Now here I flip the brush over on its side to get that side angle there. And I think that gives us a nice look. We can get in that effect of those reeds going up there. Use firm pressure to cut around the horse as best as you can. We do have some of the brown color under the horse. Want to get that in. And then also some of this saddle gear as well. We'll just treat that all as one section of color and value. Got the boot right here. All right, and you might not think that this would be the same color, but let's paint this on the shadowed part of the tail and leg or whatever that is, and a little bit on the hind legs that are in shadow. Just touch a bit of the horse in the bottom, which has some of that golden color. Also a little bit down here as well. And I think we have that everything pretty much covered for the dark brown hues. So you can see now we set up some initial contrast here, right? We set up contrast between the reeds, the rider, part of his gear, and the background. I do have that blotch there, and I didn't see it. It dried so fast. Now you can take your brush and put it into your rinse water. That was one supply I forgot to mention at the beginning, but you'll have that in your welcome kit. You want to have your container that's got some water in it where you can rinse off your brush. And I just like to set it in there for a bit. But you definitely want to clean those brushes out as quickly as you can so they don't get damaged by sitting in the water for too long. If you can clean them out and set them off to the side without them drying on you, that's even better. I'm not always able to do that here. But anyway, all right, so what I want to do is just kind of fix my mistake here that I have on the bottom, this little blotchy spot. So If you have a mistake, this will show you how you can do it as well. We'll take a little titanium white, add just a little bit of that raw umber dark glaze. And I'm going to go ahead and let's just get my camera down there and we'll just kind of paint over that. Cover that up for right now, not a big deal. And one more layer and it should be pretty much gone. All right. Now for our next glaze, and this would be well, we're still in step number 1, but for our next glaze for step number 1, we want to block in the cool color. So we're going to work into the sky, we're going to work into the snow and into the horse, and we're going to hit that with a bluish glaze. So let's go ahead and rinse off our brush completely, our 1-inch flat. I like to wipe that brush here on my little towel I have at my side, and also on here. And make sure it's extra dry, because if it's not dry, it's going to be a real pain. You have water dripping into your paint. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a little bit of ultramarine blue, just on the corner of our brush, a little bit of phthalo blue. And phthalo blue is a strong color, so boy, you got to be careful with that, not to take too much. I take a little more ultramarine blue than phthalo blue. Maybe at a ratio of about 2/3 ultramarine blue to 1/3 phthalo. Mix that into your matte medium, like this. And just try to get a little bit of just try to get a nice little mixture here. So if you're curious as far as how to set up your palette using aluminum foil, I do have a video on that, why I use aluminum foil for my palettes. But some folks like to use different palette systems, but you can go ahead and use anything that works for you. I cover mine with aluminum foil, and I just basically tape it on the bottom side of my palette, you know, with packaging tape, and then it looks like this on the top, and it works really, really well for me. But you use whatever works for you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this color here kind of mixed in. And we're going to apply this on the top. And we're just going to get a nice even distribution of paint. Let me show this color to you on my white card so you can see what that looks like as well. So this is what the glaze looks like independent of the canvas. So it's very, very faint. Very faint. But we're going to apply that to the top. Keep a nice wet edge. And we're just going to try to brush that across using horizontal strokes and diagonal strokes. If you overlap over the hat a little bit, that's not a big deal, so don't worry about that. Just try to keep a wet edge and a lot of paint on your brush and really bring it across like that. Okay, and then you can finish off with some horizontal strokes. Smooth it out. Good to overlap into the weeds a little bit. That way you don't have any ghost white areas that aren't covered. Okay, reload your brush. Add a little more glaze to this. Okay, and you're looking at a glaze. It's very, very faint. Go fainter than what you think. 95% medium to 5% paint, because most of the time artists that begin with this technique go way too opaque because this is something you're not used to. So really try to get a lot of matte medium on your brush, and then double check yourself before you even put your glaze onto your canvas by taking a piece of white paper or white cardstock and testing your glaze and what it would look like on here, and make sure it's very translucent. All right, so now we're going to apply this to the snow on the bottom. We're just going to get a little bit of this color here. Yep, that's very faint. That's what we want. Bring it into the hill a little bit. Okay, bring it into the weeds, maybe about up to this level. So right up here, let it overlap. You can actually go over the horse because the horse is in shadow and he's got cool tones. Basically, this bluish color is because of the sky, and the sky is reflecting on the snow, and it's also reflecting on the horse. So let's see, we're going to paint. Yeah, we can paint into the horse a little ways. And let's try not to go up into this area here because there's some warm tones we want to isolate. Now this is where it's very important to see your sketch. In your sketch, you should have some delineations. Let me just move my camera down here a little bit, where you marked off your shadows. So make sure you don't bring the glaze past those shadow points. Very important. And you can do this. You definitely can do it. Just see where you marked off your shading here and bring your glaze up to that point, because you want to make a distinction between these shadows that are in the reference photo, and it's a difference between the color and the tonal value. So if we look at a reference photo, you can see that shadows, kind of cool colors, highlights, lighter and warmer. See those distinctions right there? That's what we're trying to create. So we want to get those shadows painted in and create the specific shapes of those shadows, which you should have marked off with your sketch. All right, so I'm going to continue. Continue all the way into here and here. And then a little bit on the side of the horse, right there. Just like that. And put a little bit here on the legs. All right, good. Now we want to continue this glaze on the ground. So where you finished off, don't go over areas you already did. Kind of cut up alongside them and use very light brush pressure. If your glazes are light enough, it shouldn't be a big deal if it overlaps a bit, but just try to get some glazes in the foreground here, and this will give us something that we can add white on top of. Right, so let's just kind of glaze over this foreground as much as we can. I'm going to add a little more ultramarine blue to my glaze because it just kind of ran out. Try to get more on my brush. Let's make sure I have my camera positioned so you can see these glazes. All right, we're going to continue, fill this in. If you can paint around the horse's legs, do so. That would be a great way to develop some contrast between the cool and warm tints. Okay, we're using horizontal strokes. Now this whole section, if you can do this all at one time, that would be great. You can overlap into the hill a little bit. Secret is to get a lot of paint on your brush like this. Large amounts of paint. Not so great for the brush, but great for the technique. That's why we use pretty inexpensive brushes for this, because it's a little bit tough on brushes. But we want to just kind of fan this out, okay, using horizontal strokes. You can bring it into the rest of it, great. If you have a little bit of blotchiness, you know, where the layers are starting to coagulate, it's not a huge thing. Just try to smooth it out using very light pressure, glide it along. And you're going to be adding more layers, so you'll be able to smooth it out. But, you know, once you get it situated nicely, don't overwork it. Just kind of let it go. And if you have a few areas that end up being blotchy, it's better just to let them sit and dry than to try to smooth them out, because once acrylic starts to coagulate and dry, it's just really gets difficult to work with. So you have to just kind of set aside any perfectionism and just realize, hey, if I don't get it in this layer, I'll get it in the next one or the one after that. All right, so that's kind of how it should look at this stage with these two glazes. So we have our brown glaze, our blue glaze, and we established a difference between the tonal value structure and the colors as well, or warm and cool. So now we build off of that. And that's what success in acrylic painting is. It's just kind of building off of your previous steps. It's a success, that you achieved in your previous steps. And you just build off of that and build off of that and build off of that and add more and more precision, more and more nuances, more and more detail. All right, so this is what it looks like here in this stage. And now we're ready for step number 2, where we're going to block in contrast on a smaller scale. I'm going to get my palette freshened up here, just kind of spray it, make sure everything stays nice and moist. There we are. And now in this stage, since we've developed this initial sense of contrast, we want to work on that even more. And we're going to darken a few areas within the rider. That's going to be the next step, because that's going to push the contrast further. We'll also use some of the colors we use to darken some of the interior clothing, wrinkles, and incorporate them into darker portions of the background as well. All right, let's do that. We're going to take a 1/4 inch, or 3/8 flat. Take a 3/8 flat, and we're going to grab some raw umber dark. And let's see. I think we might want to add just a little bit of ultramarine blue. All right, so raw umber dark and ultramarine blue. So it's going to be about 2/3 raw umber dark, 3/4 raw umber dark to about 1/4 ultramarine blue. And I think, based on what I'm seeing, that should be good. Try to keep things as simple as we can. But this glaze should be a little bit more opaque than the previous one. All right, so this one is going to be more like a 70% matte medium, 30% paint. And this is what it's going to look like on our white card, if you can see the difference. And so it is going to be a little bit darker than the previous one. So you can see that difference there. All right, so let's go ahead and apply it. We're going to start. Let's kind of work our way from left to right, and we'll start with these reeds and kind of hit a couple pockets in there. There's a triangular shape we want to hit, so let's do that. And I'm using the brush and creating some triangular shapes. Triangular shapes. I have a lot of paint on the brush, and one of the ways you can adjust your blending is by using less pressure on your brush and letting less paint come out onto it. But I'm creating some little patterns in here. All right, just kind of turning my brush in a couple of different angles. And we're developing some small pockets of shading. Small pockets of shading in here. And I'll put in a couple little divots up on the top. So I'm resting my hand on the canvas to get a little additional stability to get some of these little shapes. And now I'm going to go and start working on the rider. So not a lot of work on that side, but we do want to start establishing some tonal value contrasts on some interior shapes here on the rider. So we're going to work on some shading on this left-hand side. Just like this. And, you know, this should correspond with what you've sketched. So you can really develop that sense of form. We want to be aware of our light source, which is on the right-hand side. Sunlight kind of shining through slightly in the front, and the shadows are on the left-hand side. So we're aware of that, you know, based on a reference photo, what we can see there, and trying to incorporate that in. Okay, let's use the corner of our brush, and then we'll kind of develop some of these little shadow shapes in here as well. And I like using a small flat brush because it just can do a lot of things. If you're using just the corner of it, see how I have it turned? You can get lots of detail, but then you can flip it and cover a broader area quite easily. So this is developing contrast within a smaller scale here. And this is, again, step number 2. Now we're going to fill in this whole section here of his clothing. I'm going to darken the interior so that, you know, because he has a couple different layers on, right? And we want to show those differences in the layers. Now we're going to do a couple little wrinkles. Use the corner of your brush. If you're not comfortable using the corner of your brush like this, you could switch to a detail brush as well. Like a small round, like a size 1/0 or even like a size 1 or 3 might work too. Use very light pressure at points, you know, where you're trying to get detail. You can just go a little bit lighter. You have to, rather than letting too much paint come out, that would then cause your detail to disappear. So by varying the amount of pressure you use, and you're, again, resting your hand on the canvas, you can really get a lot of control on what your glazes look like. I'm going to darken this entire area below his chin, putting in the shadow under the lapel. Okay, this is an important shadow here on that side. And the beard is kind of in shadow. We've got the brim of the hat. And let's see if I can get that camera up a little higher. And then we want to get the shadow on the left side of the hat corresponding with our light source. Just like that. A little divot right there on the other side of the top of the hat. Shadow under the brim right here. Now this might be really tricky, but if you can, try to get the details for the eyebrows and eyes just to hit them, even if it's just with the corner of the brush. Get the edges of the shadow kind of delineated more. And the little mustache in here. Got to get that as well. Try not to have too much paint on your brush or it's going to be difficult. And again, use a detail brush if you need to for this. I just don't want to switch. All right, so we're going to continue. If you have a flat brush that has an angle like this, that works even better. If you happen to have any like that, you can do that same thing with just a regular flat. You just have to shift the brush a little bit more to get the tip to engage on the canvas. Okay, we're filling it in here. Trying to get some little wrinkles on his jacket. Okay, and now we're going to move down and continue this, filling in. Let's see, this section, yeah, this should be dark too. This whole section, these should be pretty dark. And I guess the shadow really should cover this whole part of his hand because this whole thing is in shadow. So we need to make that choice. Yeah, we have to make that choice and just fill this whole thing in right here. Now, if you're not fast enough with the paint and you let it sit for a while, it does tend to get a little blotchy. And as I'm talking here, it's drying so quickly here with this wood heat in my studio. So have to be careful. This section here needs to be filled in. I neglected to fill that in, but we'll get that. So try not to overlap over areas you've already done. If you miss a spot and it dries, try to, instead of overlapping it, paint around it, because with the glazing technique, anytime you overlap a glaze or a layer, it makes what's underneath it get darker. And it's just a way different way of painting than opaque, where with opaque, if you put the same color on top, it really doesn't change it. Like if you're doing house painting, but with the glazing technique, you put a layer on top of another layer. It could be the same exact mix on your palette, but as you layer it on top, it's going to get darker. And I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. Is I take this same layer and then I put it on top of the previous one. See what happens? It gets darker where they overlap. Like here, it gets darker where they overlap. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, back to this. We're filling in some of the detail for the straps. And this painting has a lot of detail, so it takes some precision. I can't really force this painting or go too painterly with it because there's just so much detail. It has to be precisely rendered. Put in a little bit of shading right here on this lower section of the horse. All right, and just kind of blend that in like that. Put a little bit of shading on the left side of the leg of the horse because that is a little darker in value. And we kind of have some different tones. The horse has white fur, but a little bit darker on the bottom, a little bit of some golden tones. So we're going to use this color for that. And I'm going to color in the strap. And then you have some more of the straps on the horse. Like right here, we want to get that kind of filled in. And that actually should have been done in one of my previous glazes. That's okay, let's just fill in this whole strap because the whole thing has to be darker. And I just want to keep the color simple, even though it is more of a burnt sienna color. I just want to use this as a base color. Keep everything very simple. All right. So that's good. And now put in a little bit of shading right here. And then right here, put a little bit of shading in there just to get that shape cemented in. There's some gear on the horse's face. I want to make sure I get that. So I'm just going to take the side of the brush. You could use a detail brush if you need to. Get that side strap. Get a little bit of shading on the rope. It's somewhat in shadow here. Get a little distinction there. A little bit to the left shadowed part of this rope, even though it's lighter in tone. Put in some glazes for the nostril and the mouth and the eyes, just to get that tonal value difference, that contrast developing. A little bit right by the ear, that's darker as well. Let's see about any of these ropes, maybe something for that. And then we have also a little bit on the bottom here, somewhat darker on the left-hand side. You want to make sure you put this on the left-hand side to develop that sense of shading and depth. There we go. All right. All right, so that's good. So now you can see what we have with, well, the first half of step number 2, excuse me, the first half of step number 2 finished, where we blocked in the contrast on a smaller scale. And now that we did it with the brown color, we need to follow up with the blue color and put in some of these contrasts on a smaller scale. So let's do that. Spray my palette again. Make sure everything is nice and damp. And then we're going to get that finished here. All right. So now let's go ahead and get that flat brush going, rinse it off really well. And let's get a little more matte medium on the palette. Let's take some ultramarine blue. Now we're going to use a larger ratio of ultramarine blue than in the previous glaze. Now it's going to be like 2/3 ultramarine blue, 1/3 phthalo blue. And there's a reason for that, but basically we want the shadow part of the bluish tints to be a little bit cooler in tone. So to have, more of a violet blue than a greenish blue. All right, so we're gonna use that. And I'm gonna add just a tiny, tiny bit of raw umber dark just to desaturate it a little bit so it doesn't get too intense with the blue color. Let's add just a little bit of raw umber dark to this. And we'll take a small amount of alizarin crimson. It's a very, very strong color, so just a little bit of that. You notice what we've got here for this color. Let's take a little more alizarin crimson, just a bit, and bring it in. Now, if you get too much alizarin crimson in, then pull in more blue to compensate, and a little more raw umber dark. The idea here is to get a glaze that's kind of blue, but not too strong, kind of a grayish blue. Okay, let's test this out on our white card and see what we have here. All right, so that looks like a pretty nice color. As I hold it up to my reference photo, get a pretty good match. Yeah, we get a pretty good match here as we hold this up. All right, that's good. So let's start filling this into the background. We'll start on this left-hand side and just start brushing that across. And we'll just kind of fill that in. So this will give us some contrast between the hills and the sky. So in all the areas where you kind of delineated some darker values, go ahead and put this glaze in. I want to show that to you. All right, just want to make sure I have it on camera so you can see it well. So we continue this and just kind of fill in these shapes. Cut up along the edge of that mountain. Okay, all the areas I have sketched in, I'm just going to kind of go over those areas. Hold your brush more perpendicular to the canvas so you can really squeeze out some paint. See, isn't that nice? That really steps up some wonderful contrast. I thank God for that when things work out well. All right, now we'll glaze in a little bit of texture right here, angling down, a little bit right there. There, that's good. Now let's do a little bit of work on the snow. All right, so now we're going to go to the lower part of the canvas. And we're going to start blocking in some of these shadows here. All right, so it's like that. So any areas where you've got, you know, your shadows sketched in, hopefully you sketched in a few shadows. According to what I demonstrated in my sketching portion of this masterclass. And you can just fill in right in those areas that you sketched. See, I kind of block these in very simple shapes, just so we know where to put in these shadows. So we have a couple shadows down here in the lower right area. I want to get some of them in there too. One maybe going off the canvas, almost off the canvas. But these are the main shadows we're looking at. Kind of build off of that. And then this was that blotch. I got to cover that up more. I'll do that later. Okay. And then I'm going to put just a little bit of this color in the back so we can, you know, have it fade to lighter in the front. So we just pop in a little bit and follow the contours of the snow when you brush. Don't brush vertically, brush horizontally. Or at least finish off with a horizontal brush stroke that follows the contours of the hill. You can smooth it out by varying with a few degrees, going a little bit one way and a little bit the other way. So a little bit this way and then a little bit down. So kind of crisscross strokes, but finish it up, again, following with the contours of the hill. Now let's do a little bit on that right-hand side as well. We'll get a little bit of, it's darker in the back. It's darker in the back, so we're going to glaze up there, just like this. Okay, And I'm holding my brush very perpendicular to the canvas to really get that paint in the weave of the canvas texture. Then I use less pressure and blend it out. So we want it to be dark up there and lighter down here. According to what I see in the reference photo, that's how it looks. So that's why I'm just brushing up there and I'm leaving off in this section down here. And to give us a nice focal point in these kind of areas in the front, the foreground, where we've got, you know, the little streaks and everything and divots in the ground where the horse was plodding through. All right, let's use this opportunity, get a little bit of shading on the horse. So we're going to follow up on some of the previous layers. Like right here, we'll put a little bit of shading on the horse's hindquarters, just on the bottom edge, leave off on the top. So that way it develops just a sense of three-dimensionality there. And get a little separation between, you know, the main chest area and the rest of the body. A little bit of shading in here, right here as well. These glazes are pretty faint. Gives us a little more opportunity to develop that sense of depth. We want to make sure we're not going too dark. That was probably a little too much. Add maybe a little bit of matte medium and just thin it out a bit, make it more translucent. So that mane is a little bit darker than the rest, so I'm just going to hit that with a glaze. Also gonna darken this section right here a little bit. We have a highlight in here. I don't want to miss that, so it's got to get darker right here. Then need to have a little open spot where it's lighter right about there. It's right about here. It needs to be lighter, where that strap goes underneath. A little bit of shading right here on this section of the mouth. All right. That looks good. That looks really good. So, all right, this is where we're at in this part of the process. Now we're going to finish up with a quick third step where we're going to introduce one more level of color and warmth. We have our main division between the cool tints and the warm tints, but let's just add one more level of warmth and we'll introduce a little bit of richness to some of the background tones and even some of the foreground tones. So for this, let's take our larger brush, that 1-inch flat, rinse it off, and then let's get some fresh matte medium on the palette. Put it over here in this vacant spot. And you might wonder, what do we do when this whole area is filled up with paint? Well, then I just take a piece of aluminum foil and I kind of trim it and I set it right in here. And then I put it right on top and it sticks because I have paint on there already. And then I have a fresh mixing area ready to go and I don't have to redo a whole palette. So that's what I do when I run out of room. And I can always recycle that aluminum foil at my local recycling center and get paid for it and keep the environment clean. So I like that as well. Well, fresh matte medium here. Now we're going to introduce kind of a new color, which will be raw sienna. It's a nice grassy color, like dead grass, works really, really well. And we're going to introduce that let's see, and maybe just a little bit of burnt sienna. All right, so I'd say 2/3 raw sienna, 1/3 burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a strong color, so don't use too much of that at this juncture. But those two together will give you a nice tone. All right. So now I want to show you what this glaze looks like here on my white card. All right, so you can get an idea for that. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit of a different color, right, than the raw umber dark, a little more yellowish. That'll be good to get some warm tints here. And we're going to place that in the background, over the clothing, a little bit on the horse as well. And I think it'll just add a little bit new dimension. All right, that might be a little too strong. Let me just tone that down a bit, add a little more matte medium. I don't want it to be too strong, and as you put it on there, it could be scary. It gets away from you. So here we go, a little bit lighter. That's what it looks like. Let's go a little lighter with that. All right, that should be better. We just want to just kind of ease into everything here. That's what we want to do, just fade this painting in. Let's try to get into a distinction. I'm going to just wipe this away with my towel. Let's get a little distinction here. So that, yeah, right about here. Just want to have the warmth in there so we can introduce some of the snow behind some breaks in those reeds. All right. If you keep that paint nice and wet and you have a large amount on your canvas, you'll be able to work with it longer and you can smooth it out. Cut up along the edge of the horse. Now bring that into everything. You can just bring that into everything on the rider. Brush it across, just smooth it out. Keep a wet edge. We'll put some on the hat as well, on his face. And you can hit the lower half of his face, but try to keep the upper half free. All right, so see if I can show that to you. Yeah, I just want to show that what that looks like up close. So just try to get a little bit on the shadow and the lower part of the face. And we'll just leave that little sliver there, the cheek, nose, and that part light without a glaze on it. That'll really make it pop. Get a little bit of this glaze going on the halter of the horse, if that's what it's called. And I'm going to get a little bit of this on the bottom part, you know, where the legs are getting closer to the ground. Tail. Knees. Put a little bit there on the knee area. Hind leg. So all the areas basically that you hit with the other glaze, you want to do this as well. And then let's also get a little bit on the reeds here as well. If you go over something, you can just kind of wipe it off with your finger, because acrylic is pretty non-toxic. As long as you don't eat it and you're not using cadmium pigments, you should be fine. But always, you know, you want to check with your doctor if you have any sensitivities to things like this, but they're generally considered much more non-toxic than oil paints and other kinds of paints. So just kind of brush it out like that. Yeah, so we're just basically warming that up a little bit, and I think that adds another dimension to it, makes it nice. And I think that be about it. Yeah, that should be about it, so I don't want to overdo it here. All right, so this is where we're going to stop off for today. All right, we've got The major distinctions in tonal value. Again, everything is very faded in this technique. It looks very ghost-like, or maybe that's not the best word. It just looks like you're looking through a foggy mirror or something, right? It's just very, very cloudy. And it's almost like a Polaroid photograph, you know, where you're seeing an image and it's just kind of fading in, and, you know, you wait for that film to develop. It gets a little darker, a little darker. That's what we're going to be doing with this technique. We're just going to kind of enhance everything a little bit darker each time, a little more contrast, a little more richness of color, a little more depth. And then towards the end, we start adding details to it and really blending things and smoothing things out and fixing inconsistencies. And then it really starts taking off and looking gorgeous. And I'm excited to get you to that stage, but it does take a lot of prep work to get to that level. So hang with me here. We've got more lessons to go in these masterclass series. And again, I'm looking forward to helping you with your portrait. If you enjoyed this lesson, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel to get notified of more videos like this. Share this video with your friends, and that helps it to be seen by more people. And again, if you haven't signed up for that portrait challenge, do so with the link in the description below or the comment, realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. Well, I'm looking forward to teaching you in our next lesson, where we continue building up depth with the glazing technique. But for now, it has been my joy to be able to share this with you. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, leave a comment below on this video or in our Facebook group, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you so much. God bless you. See you in the next challenge. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.